When I was a kid, one day this nurse gives me this toy. I guess I was, I don't know, 5 or something. She put this toy in front of me and it had these knobs, you know, that you had to turn to see some pictures go across the screen. I couldn't turn the knobs. I couldn't do it, and I got so mad. I busted it up with my foot. That's when I knew I was different from the other kids.
In 1995, Mark Gizewski, short on cash and addicted to drugs, put his hand in his pocket and pretended to have a gun. He tried to rob a store but was quickly captured. He was sentenced to 6 years to life. After doing his time, he was released. But 8 years later, while on parole, he was arrested for buying pot and carrying a weapon, so he went back to jail.
When you're disabled, people always look down on you. And years and years and years, it starts from when you're a child and people just, make a fool of you and make jokes about you. And you have this real insecurity complex and you have to prove yourself. And if the old macho thing, you put in the old macho thing that men are famous for as well, where a man has to prove himself and be a man. And that's why you end up committing crimes, so that people are afraid of you. Or people are, wow, they're respecting you. And all you basically want is to be treated as normal, as a normal human being. And I think that's what Mark's been doing.
In the early 1960s, more than 2,000 women in Europe and Great Britain gave birth to deformed children after taking a drug called thalidomide. It was one of the most horrifying episodes in medical history.
Thalidomide was a drug that was introduced in the late 1950s as a supposedly safe sedative. And they particularly advertised the fact that you couldn't kill yourself with it, and it was basically targeted at the barbiturate market, because in those days people that wanted sedatives or sleeping tablets, they were all taking barbiturates, and there were a lot of deaths from barbiturate overdose.
In 1957 it was introduced as a pill for women suffering from morning sickness in pregnancy.
The reason for morning sickness, as it was believed in the 1950s, was that it was psychosomatic, that women got all excited and hormonal and they just needed to be calmed down, the poor things. And that was what thalidomide was supposed to do. You had to take it between 20 and 42 days after conception. And if you took it around day 20, it'd be central brain damage, and almost none of the babies like that survived. And 21 to 22, eye damage, you might be missing one or both eyes. And 23, the ears and the face would be damaged. And 24 and 5, you probably have no arms or very short arms. And around day 30, you might lose the complete set of legs. And through to day 35, when it would maybe just affect your thumbs, and you might have thumbs that look like a 5th finger. But it also damaged the heart and the intestinal system from top to bottom, from the esophagus through to the rectum and anus, and most of those injuries were fatal to the children. And so we think that probably 80% of the children affected died in the womb, were miscarried or stillborn. And we think that probably between 20 and 25,000 were born alive.
I think 50% of those who were actually born alive died within 12 months, but I suspect that, and that's the general suspicion, I think, that a large number of them were actually, to put no finer word on it, murdered by their parents, by their doctors, or by their nurses.
Sadly, in Europe and in Britain, we have evidence of many babies having been killed by the doctors and nurses as soon as they were born.
I've been on pain medication my whole life. My back and hips hurt all the time on account of that thalidomide. I was in the hospital for the first 5 years. My mom couldn't take care of me because I was too disabled. I'd say I've had at least 30 surgeries. That's just to try to correct what the thalidomide did.
Mark is quite a badly damaged individual. The shoulder joints are partly missing, and so he's got shoulders that are prone to dislocate. His upper arms are very similar to normal, but his lower arms have the radius bone missing. So he's only got one bone in each of his forearms, and that bone is shortened. And that means that the structure that supports the wrist is missing. So his hands are naturally turned inwards because the bone to keep the wrist out isn't there. The wrist joint itself will have several bones that are malformed, and on his hands he doesn't have any thumbs because that's standard for most of our people. So he's got 4 fingers on each hand, but his hands that aren't very easily able to be used, on arms that are shortened. Now then down to his hips, which are both defective, the hip joints, and his one leg was deformed from halfway down the femur, so that he had an amputation above the knee on one side, and on the other side there's a severely malformed hip and reductions of some of his leg bones. So for a long time he used to get about walking with a prosthetic leg, but of course that throws strain on the opposite side and damages the opposite side hip. And where he is now, they're not allowing him to have his prosthesis repaired, so he doesn't have that, which means that he's reliant on a wheelchair. And the problems he's confronting is that he really needs a motorized wheelchair, because with his hands and arms he doesn't have much strength to move it around, but the authorities are saying he must work with a standard heavy-duty wheelchair. He can't have even a lightweight manual wheelchair, and he has to contort himself to push himself around with his short arms and his deformed hands in that. Then we go on. Mark also had some internal damage, perhaps somebody prefer I didn't mention, but it included being born with major malformations to his anus, which had a lot of corrective surgery, but has left him with a problem in that area for the rest of his life. And, you know, this is all part of the dismal picture, which means that as a child he was in and out of hospital, having operations and missing out on schooling and coping with quite a lot of pain that a tiny child shouldn't have to experience. And this in a family that had several other older children, that was fairly lively, and according to the records we have, was not a very good place for his support.
The first 6 years of his life, that's when your fundamental, everything you know, the fundamentals of your whole personality life is established in those years. And his was in hospital, in a ward. So that the family and the schooling and the interacting socially, there's none of that there. It's just been hospital wards and nurses.
Prolonged early hospitalization followed by the relatively ineffective operations may well have contributed to a severe psychiatric abnormality, impairing the possibility for independence and self-care. He was assessed as severely handicapped, and the family situation was noted not to help. The psychological reports also indicated impaired academic performance, again likely due to the prolonged periods of hospitalization and incomplete rehabilitation. So he didn't get any breaks.
You know, things are deteriorating all across the board with thalidomide. Well, on a scale of 1 to 5 on the point system, I'm probably about a 1. Mark's sort of over halfway. Mark will be on about 75%, so he really does need the help. Nobody understands thalidomide in the US. Obviously we've got experts in Great Britain who can understand and try and do the best to help Mark.
Most of the thalidomide victims, as Mark has found, are in great pain a great deal of the time because of the terrific wear and tear on their skeletons.
Perhaps the easiest thing to picture is what it's like to be born with very short arms. Now, these folks got very skilled at doing things with their feet, and they became very mobile around their hips, and they can pick up things and they can use their feet almost like their hands. But they also find themselves bending over a lot and using their spine. For some people, their spine then starts getting damaged, and the strain on the shoulders of having a short hand that you're not able to rest, sets up pain in the shoulders and the top of the spine. So it's a combination of the joint and bone damage to start with, and then how that's compounded by having to use those limbs and the other limbs in ways that your limbs weren't intended to operate.
I'm terrible trouble with my back, also with my legs and my joints, and my shoulders and my neck. Ironically, the only thing which doesn't cause me pain is my hands.
There's a prisoner who has severe disabilities, severe pain, and he's not being provided the proper treatment or proper equipment to take care of himself and to manage that. It's just as simple as that.
We're not talking about a career criminal that just went out and started committing all these crimes. I think we're talking about somebody that's tried to live with a state of severe disability and pain, and what do you do?
It's quite interesting to me, as I read the details of his supposed criminal activity, how actually he's been able to do the various things of which he's been charged. There seems to be some issue there in my mind as to what really is the truth.
Can he really be held to be culpable if you look at that? And we're watching all this juvenile research. He's an adult, but he has a 1st to 3rd grade reading level. So can he be culpable for all of these cases that we're talking about? Because yes, he's a persistent felon, and he was pushed into plea bargains, and the records I've seen, none of this is coming up.
I don't like to say it, but the Department of Corrections saved my life. I mean, before I got busted, I was doing drugs, coke, freebasing, heroin, pot. I ran out of money, so I decided to try to rob the store. I seen it on television, and it worked 100 times for them. Anyway, I went in, I put my hand in my pocket and pretended to have a gun. I didn't have one, but I pretended, you know? So I said it was a holdup. So somebody comes behind me and he grabs me, puts his arms around me, and I got caught. Got sent to jail on robbery, 2nd degree. It was a 6 years to life sentence. No gun, 6 to life. Can you believe that?
Mark makes no excuse for the wrongs that he committed, but the punishment must fit the crime. Mark is not a danger to society. It's just preposterous to think so.
I've never had a real job. Once I went to one of those places, you know, where they put the handicapped people to work. I was there all week putting, I don't know, something together. I don't remember what. And after a couple of weeks, we got our paychecks. Yeah, it was like $15 or $30 or something. It was a ripoff. I never went back. I did own a laundromat in Brooklyn. After I got out of jail in 2001, I bought a place. I'm a people person. I like talking to people. That's why I figured it'd be great. People got to do laundry, right? I liked it. I was carrying a lot of money around, so I felt like I needed to protect myself. And I had a gun, 25 Beretta, semi-automatic, fully loaded. To be honest, I don't even think I could fire the thing. And with my hands, if I could have fired it, I probably would have shot myself. I know I was on parole. I shouldn't have had one. I agree with that, and I'm sorry. I mean, it was stupid, but like I said, I wanted to protect myself. I never pointed it at anybody. I won't do it again.
On paper, Mark looks like he's someone that should be in prison. He has several cases. They're not big cases. I mean, they're not cases like murder too or anything, but it still can be considered a violent case. He had a loaded gun. And that my question, could he really use the gun if he had to do it? I can tell you many times when we speak on the phone, he drops the phone. So, and I've seen him have altered capacity of mobility with his hands. So then the question is, can he even use the gun if he had to? Was it more of a thing for his self-esteem to know he had something so he could protect himself? Because He's very vulnerable.
I was 20 years in prison, and I don't consider myself a criminal. You know, you make a decision, and you break the law, and it's a one-time thing, and there's no going back. And you have to pay the penalty. Of course, you have to pay the penalty for your wrongdoing. Everybody does. But it can't go on and on and on with Mark.
He didn't have any problems with corrections until I came on the scene and started asking them to accommodate his medical care. They do random tests, and he got a drug use ticket, and then he got a second drug use ticket, which was within 30 days of the first one. And then a third ticket was lodged by a nurse. And throughout this, it's escalating because now lawyers have been retained. For me, the last straw was the alleged assault. How can someone do that to somebody in the vulnerable state that Mark is?
On January 5th, a CO came in to tell me to pack up my shit. I was going to be leaving on Monday to go to Upstate Correctional Facility. He said he was not going to feed me breakfast, he didn't like me, and he didn't care if I was hungry. I said, screw you. Well, you know, I used a swear word. He got mad and came into my room. He pushed me out of my wheelchair to the floor. When I hit the floor, I knew my arm was broken right away. The officer then kicked me so hard in the chest that I passed out and peed all over myself. After about 10 to 15 minutes, the officer came back to my room and told me if I said anything to anybody, even at Cayuga Medical Center, that when I came back to 5 Points, he would fuck me up again or kill me next time.
He was pushed out of his chair and then stomped on, and as a result he suffered a fractured elbow, and he had a contusion on his chest, which has been confirmed by the medical personnel at the 5 Points Correctional Facility. However, at that time, the jail has since informed us that he fell out of his chair and has really no account for why there was contusion on his chest.
We were expecting the New York justice system to take a reasoned view of Mark and his offences and release him from jail at the end of his last term. And it now seems to us that the prison staff have the ability to keep petty offenders in their clutches for the rest of their lives, and that can't be right. But when I read the report about him being beaten up, a man with this level of disability, and a boot mark on his chest, and one of his little arms broken in 5 places, I thought, this is absolutely appalling. This cannot be in the state of New York in the year 2014 that we are hearing about these sort of things.
But the thing is, you know, is that jail is going to kill me. I mean, I'm afraid I'm going to die in here. I know people who died. If their families don't claim them, they get buried in the yard. They don't even put their names on the headstones, you know, just their number. I don't want to die in here.
Well, it was very upsetting to see Mark in the Roman prison. I know it's a medium security prison, but to see him when I was greeted with him coming into the room in a wheelchair. He was handcuffed with his little hand to the wheelchair. Obviously he's got a leg missing, so I thought it was ridiculous that he was even in that situation to be handcuffed. But I met him. Yeah, he looked a lot younger when I met him about 14 or 15 years ago in New York. And I can see there's a big deterioration in his health, and that's why we need to get him free so he can get the right medical attention.
This man needs much, much better treatment just to alleviate his daily pain. He's going to die, you know, he's going to die in there if they don't let him out.
Unlike the Department of Corrections, I understand that Mark's done his time. He needs to be released on parole. I'd like to have a meeting with Governor Cuomo to see if we can come to some kind of agreement to get Mark released on parole and sent to England for the right medical attention. When Mark gets to the UK, we can arrange housing from him. He gets enough compensation to help him along. We can get the right housing, he can rent a property, and he can get the right medical attention. And that's what I like to see the Thalidomide Trust do. We've got things in place with HealthLink, and we've also got the medical office that can help him and direct him in the right place to get the right medical attention that he needs.
If we adequately do that and provide support or somehow managed to legally get him to leave and go to the Thalidomide Trust people where he's with support staff that can help him, that might change the ending to this story.
Oh, I'm well used to the brush-off sort of responses that you get in the early stages of these situations. But, you know, I was always known by my mother as obstinate. I regard myself as persistent.
He just needs to be put into a functional situation with a support system behind him, and he can prove himself to be a good guy. He is a good guy, but he just doesn't have any breaks. He's got nobody willing to give him the chance to prove himself to be a normal member of society. And he will do, and we will get him out. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not always going to be an oncoming train. I'm sorry, I get emotional. It's terrible. I'm sorry, but really, it's not always going to be an oncoming train. Tell him we will get him out. We don't know when, but we will. And we'll get him back here. We'll look after him.